At the founding conference of the OCIC in February of 1978, a struggle emerged over the selection of candidates for the steering committee. The Committee of Five had proposed that an elected nominations committee should be charged with presenting a slate of organizations for election to the steering committee. An alternative proposal was put forward that individuals should be elected to the SC, but this proposal was voted down. Following the vote, a struggle took place around the racism of the Committee of Five's proposal and the body's endorsement of it. Comrades began to see that given the fact that the bulk of national minority Marxist-Leninists stand outside of local organizations at this time, endorsement of the Committee of Five's proposal would exclude the possibility of the participation of most national minority Marxist-Leninists from the leading body of this newly formed organization. Comrades further saw that the reason for national minority Marxist-Leninists standing outside of organizations is because of those circles' severe weaknesses in understanding the centrality of the struggle against racism. One of the most graphic examples of overt racism expressed itself when a comrade arguing for the Committee of Five's proposal said, "What's a communist without an organization?" This comment revealed the true depth of white chauvinism in our tendency. The comrade was saying that there is no principled reason for a real communist to stand outside of an organization. The not-so-veiled implication in this view is that the national minorities who stand outside of local circles are opportunists. It places the responsibility for the situation of all or mostly white circles on national minorities. It totally liquidates the racism of the local circles and absolves them of any responsibility for building multinational unity. The proposal itself shows how the federationist approach to selecting leadership protects the mostly white character of our movement. Choosing leadership based on organizations would have excluded some of the most advanced comrades in our movement, national minority comrades. The federated leadership body would represent an expression of preserving the status quo. However, after an intense struggle, the body agreed that organizations and individuals who are not members of organizations may be elected to the steering committee. The SC made a self-criticism and summed up the struggle in a brief statement on the struggle against racism. This was the beginning of the OCIC's struggle against federationism as an obstacle to building an open, centralized, movement-wide process where individuals' participation and contributions are based on their own strengths and weaknesses, and not inhibited by the democratic centralism of any circle. It also marked the beginning of the OC's struggle against federationism because of its racist content. And it marked the beginning of the ideological struggle against racism in general. While comrades were talking about federationism as objectively racist, they were being forced to look at the reasons why national minorities stood outside of local circles. Inevitably, as we shall see, comrades would have to struggle against their own racist attitudes about national minorities that prevented them from uniting with national minority comrades. Although still not armed with a fully developed conception of an overall non-sectarian party-building approach, and weakened by an underestimation of the role of federationism, localism, and racism in our ranks, the SC endeavored to wage a struggle against federationism and its racist content in the building of the OCIC. The next expression of the SC's leadership in breaking down federationism in the OCIC was the development of two rules: no binding instructions, which meant that comrades' participation could not be bound by instructions from their organization, and minority position representation, which meant that minority positions held within organizations were to be represented at the conference. These rules proved in practice how the participation and contributions of comrades as individuals, not restricted by organizational discipline, helped to advance the ideological struggle. It also showed how, by attempting to make the conferences as broad and movement-wide as possible, the ideological struggle was enhanced by the contributions of independent Marxist-Leninists, including national minorities. Had the conferences been organized on a federated basis, the Midwest Part 18 Conference would not have had the benefit of the participation of several national minority Marxist-Leninists from Detroit who stood outside of the two circles there. One working-class national minority comrade in particular helped move the process forward during one of the small group discussions. A white comrade was taking the discussion off into an obscure tangent in order to prove his point that point 18 should not be a line of demarcation from left internationalism. The discussion and struggle went on for a few minutes, pursuing the tangential argument. The national minority comrade, Jerry, intervened and not only brought the discussion back to the concrete, but exposed the white comrade's opportunism. The white comrade was distorting history in order to bolster his point. The process was not moved forward simply because the non-federationist approach to the conferences allowed Jerry to be there. But given Jerry's concrete understanding of proletarian internationalism through his work and leadership in anti-imperialist struggles, he was able to struggle for the correct position. This is a positive example of how the breakdown of federationism serves to remove the racist obstacle to the participation of national minority comrades in the ideological struggle. The Midwest also has plenty of negative examples to share around the Part 18 conference. Joe is a national minority comrade who was a member of one of the cadre organizations in the Twin Cities. He was part of the minority view in his organization around Part 18, which was the majority view of the OC. This comrade played the leading role within his organization in consolidating the minority around the correctness of Point 18. For the Point 18 conference, the organization sent 2 members from their majority as delegates, and 1 member from the minority as an observer, and, no, it wasn't Joe. This circle was flagrantly violating the party spirit by attempting to keep its minority position out of the ideological struggle. What's more, they held the process back by not even sending the most advanced comrade holding the circle's minority position. The bind between federationism and racism in this example is clear. These comrades made sure that the leadership of the only national minority member of the circle would not be demonstrated to the entire movement. These comrades were protecting themselves. They were protecting their petty bourgeois stake as leadership in the circle. Several examples of federationism and racism developed around the National Minority Marxist-Leninist Conference in June of 1979. National minorities, the bulk of whom are advanced fighters in the class, attended the conference fully prepared and willing to discuss party building, the particular tasks of national minority Marxist-Leninists, the special oppression of national minority women, and the relationship of sexism to national minority Marxist-Leninists. The conference took up a history of the party-building movement, and the majority of comrades who attended united around the party-building perspective of the OCIC. Most of the comrades left the conference with a commitment to engage themselves in the party-building process and to win others to taking up their all-sided tasks as well. Yet it was striking that despite these comrades' unity with the task of party-building and the correctness of building an open, centralized and movement-wide process for developing the program, strategy and tactics for socialist revolution, many of the comrades had never seen the 18 Principles of Unity or even heard of the OC prior to receiving the conference preparation packet. These comrades had years of consistent and close contact with organizations that were members of the OC. The white cadre organization members had seen these national minority comrades as our organization's national minority contacts and not as comrades to unite within the context of the broader tendency. If any unity was to be developed with the national minority comrades, it would be unity around the organization's mass work and political line, not party building and uniting the tendency. Many white comrades who didn't have any national minority contacts saw the conference as a means for recruiting national minorities into their organizations. These comrades totally liquidated their own responsibilities for overcoming their weaknesses around racism in order to build their organization's multinationality. Rather than viewing the conference as a means to build and strengthen the tendency by gaining the advanced leadership of national minority Marxist-Leninists, they placed their narrow circle concerns of having a good head count above the needs of our movement. Other comrades protested the fact that their single national minority member was not invited to be on the planning committee for the conference. In these cases, The organizations desired to use their national minority member on the PC in order to advance the organization's position in the movement by sporting its multinationality. One comrade's interest in bolstering her circle was spelled out clearly when she asked, "Why wasn't DSC invited to be on the PC?" She clearly was not arguing for the national minority comrade to be on the PC because of his strengths and what he could bring to the PC, or she would have asked why wasn't he, not DSC, invited to be on it. Her white chauvinism was further exposed when, after the national minority comrade had made it clear to her that he felt the PC was adequately constituted, she chose to speak for him since she had no respect for his political evaluation of the situation. In the instance of another organization, the comrades not only wanted to use their national minority member to promote the organization by sporting its multinationality, but their white chauvinism was further exposed when it became clear that they were primarily concerned with wanting the PC members to struggle with him over his weaknesses. They were afraid of losing the only national minority member of their organization. They had no confidence in his abilities to overcome his weaknesses as a Marxist-Leninist through the process of criticism and self-criticism. They thought what would help him was unity based on skin color rather than political struggle based on genuine respect for him as a comrade. In all of these examples, the white comrades viewed the conference and the PC from the standpoint of what it could do for their organizations and not what it could do for the tendency. They maintained racist paternalistic relationships with national minority comrades and had no conception of their real strengths and what they could contribute to the party-building movement. And since they themselves had not taken the struggle against racism in their mass work and within their organizations seriously, their racist paternalism led them to ghettoize the tasks of the PC and have national minorities recruit and struggle with other national minorities. Another example of how federationism works to maintain the whites-only policy is in regard to a black comrade from Detroit, Mady. Mady had been a member of DMLO and was DMLO's representative on the Committee of Five. She was a member of the Committee of Five and part of the party-building movement until she resigned from DMLO due to its failure to take up the struggle against racism. In other words, she was a part of the leading body that developed the 18 Principles of Unity, engaged in early struggles with the Guardian and El Comité MINP, and otherwise worked to unite the tendency. But once she resigned from DMLO, her ties with the tendency were almost completely cut. DMLO comrades no longer viewed her as a part of the party-building movement. She was informed at the last minute of the founding conference of the OCIC held in Detroit but was not officially invited. By virtue of her independence, the organizational members did not see it as important to unite with her politically on the tasks of building the tendency. In fact, once she resigned from the organization, the white comrades not only attempted to close the doors to her participation in the party-building movement, but also tried to use her as an anti-racist credential in their small-circle warfare. By that time DMLO had split and there were now two tendency organizations in the city, DMLO and DSC. Members from each organization would constantly run to tell her how opportunist the other was. They had no respect for her political skills and abilities in the party-building movement and sought to have her take sides with one of the circles. It's important to understand that the interrelationship between federationism and racism is not just a matter of how it keeps national minorities out of the movement. The example of the comrade from the Twin Cities and the two comrades whose organizations wanted them on the PC shows how federationism and racism affect national minority comrades who are members of cadre organizations. There is another example. Dave is the black comrade who was a member of DSC. His leadership in our movement did not emerge until the National Minority Marxist-Leninist Conference because of DSC's federationist approach to dealing with the OC. Prior to that, his leadership and skills were hidden by the confinements of his organization. DSC had representatives interacting with the OC rather than the entire membership, and reports were given back to the cadre by the representatives. Dave, like his organization, had a position that the theoretical struggle is not primary in this period in the party-building movement. He was beginning to change his position through his work in the National Auto Fraction. His participation as an individual at the National Minority Marxist-Leninist Conference and the planning committee to build a local center exposed him to a much broader context for taking up the struggle around the all-sided tasks of Marxist-Leninists and the primacy of the theoretical struggle in our movement. In this context he easily consolidated around the primacy of the theoretical struggle and began to play a leading role in the OC. It is clear that the federationist approach of his organization to the OC and its position on the role of the theoretical struggle, held this comrade back until he came to a broad and open process as an individual. And the tendency missed out for quite some time on his advanced leadership. The Circle in Cincinnati has shown us the impact of its federationist approach to the OC on its only black member, Brenda. A white comrade from the Circle was on the leadership body for the Midwest region. When elections were coming up for the new RSC, the chair of the local center task force put Brenda forward as a candidate. The white comrade's response was, "Oh, no. Brenda's too busy leading us in our anti-racist struggles." This comrade was more interested in what Brenda was doing for his Circle, than what she could contribute to the OC. His racist paternalism toward her led him to believe that she was incapable of handling her tasks in the mass movement as well as in the party-building movement. More significantly, he liquidated the responsibility of white communists to lead in the struggle against racism. Leading the struggle against racism, as he saw it, was Brenda's task. After all, Brenda's black, and racism is black people's problem. Even if Brenda's organizational assignments were too burdensome to take on the task of leading the region, this comrade's narrow circle concerns and white chauvinism kept him from approaching the question from the standpoint, how can we free up Brenda's time so that she can participate on the RSC? Freeing up Brenda's time would mean that the white comrades would have to step forward in the struggle against racism locally. It would also mean they're not reducing Brenda to the role of simply leading the anti-racist fight. They would have to see her in an all-sided way and respect her as a Marxist-Leninist. Comrades in Philadelphia have also failed to grasp the role of federationism and small circle mentality in preserving the white and petty bourgeois nature of our movement. Comrades from the Philadelphia Workers' Organizing Committee played the leading role in uniting the tendency and working for the formation of the Committee of Five. The PWOC is a cadre organization that is broadly recognized as the most advanced in the tendency. It has a well-developed political line, engages in advanced communist work in the mass movement, and publishes a nationally distributed newspaper. Some of its cadre have contributed significantly to the development of the OCIC and other tendency forms. Given this exemplary history, one would expect that comrades from the PWOC would have valuable lessons for us all to learn from in its work in building a local center, and valuable lessons from struggles within the local center over the past several months in Philadelphia. But despite this exemplary history, these comrades have no such contribution to make, for there is no local center in Philadelphia. What are the implications of these comrades not taking up the development of a local center after all this time? It implies several things. First, that the PWOC thinks that it alone represents the tendency in Philadelphia. If it thought otherwise, there would be a local center there today. The PWOC's view of itself as representing the tendency in Philadelphia is a profound statement given its mostly white and petty bourgeois composition. In a self-criticism to the chair of the local center task force, these comrades state, a more serious error has been the view that in Philadelphia the OCIC is the PWOC. Although this was never a formulation which was put forward here, in practice this is how the work has been taken up. This statement misses the mark. The view was not that in Philadelphia the OCIC is the PWOC. The view was that in Philadelphia the anti-revisionist anti-left opportunist tendency is the PWOC. The OC was developed to unite the broader tendency forces around the 18 points and the need to forge a single leading ideological center free from the sectarian party-building efforts of the past. The OCIC centers are conceived of as the strategic form for implementing the process of forging open and movement-wide struggle and debate based on that unity. If the PWOC saw itself as the OCIC in Philadelphia, it would be about organizing a context for such struggle and debate based on that unity. The organization as a whole is not even fully consolidated around the 18 points in the OC process. The self-criticism states that no systematic and centralized process has taken place for all of its cadre to discuss the 18 points in OC documents. In other words, all of the PWOC do not even have the benefit of organization-wide discussions and debate around OC matters. Their federationism and racism is further exposed in their own self-criticism. This led to not building the OCIC and political unity with our most advanced contacts, but rather to a process of recruiting them to our circle. In effect, this has led to undercutting and competing with the OCIC rather than complementing and building the process. Recruiting advanced contacts to the organization rather than uniting on the political basis of the OC did not mean undercutting and competing with the OCIC. It meant liquidating the OCIC and the tendency as a whole. There's nothing wrong with recruiting to a cadre organization. But recruiting to a cadre organization is based on the political line and unity of that circle, which can of course include the 18 points, but is a much higher level of unity than the 18 points. So what happens to those comrades who do not agree with the PWOC's party-building line or position on the trade union question? The PWOC's practice says that disunity with the political line of the PWOC means you are outside of the tendency in Philadelphia. And this is a majority-white and petty bourgeois organization. Their work in auto, health, anti-Rizzo, independent political action, the women's movement, etc., says to the national minority and white advanced workers and other national minority forces they work with that if you want to take up party building but can't unite with the PWOC, you are in essence an opportunist, because you're outside of the genuine Marxist-Leninist tendency in the party building movement. This federationist, racist, anti-working class view means that our movement cannot benefit from the contributions of all the advanced workers and national minorities in Philadelphia who are not members of the PWOC. It also deprives the tendency of the leadership of national minority comrades within the PWOC. This view serves to keep those contributions out of our movement and protect the status quo.